Welcome back again, freshman Christology students. Today is Tuesday, May the 5th. Today is the last day, the third day of these lectures on the subject of virtue. Once you finish today's lecture, the Cardinal Virtues Part 2, you finish the attendance assignment by 3 p.m. Your other assignment then is a test that's going to be due by this Thursday morning at 8 a.m. So again, by this Thursday, May the 7th, you have to have finished that 25-question test. That's 50 points in the test category. So review these notes, take a look through these slides, take a look at the Google Doc with the instructions, information about the test. Once you're done reviewing, put your notes aside, don't consult them, and take the test as your own best effort from what you remember and what you've learned in this unit. So far in this conversation about the virtues, we heard in particular from Mr. Godfrey about what we as Christians call the theological virtues. Christians don't have a trademark or a monopoly on the notions of faith or hope or love, also known as charity. But those three qualities, those three virtues, mean something in particular to us as Christians. We talk about faith as a response to what God has revealed, believing in the God of Jesus Christ and what he's taught through the Bible, through the church. When we talk about hope, we don't just mean it in a general sense that we hope things will turn out, we hope for good weather, but hope and conviction that we can trust God and we can trust God's plan for us and we can trust the future that God has prepared for us. And when we talk about love or charity, we don't just mean in a general sense or in just a religious sense, but we mean sacrificing heroically like Jesus sacrificed for the human race when he died for us on the cross. We also began to delve into the broader intellectual tradition going all the way back to Greek philosophers like Aristotle. On the subject of virtue, if you asked Aristotle, who lived a few hundred years before Jesus, what makes for a good life, what makes for authentic human happiness, he would say the answer is virtue. Happiness is not just an emotional state, but if we want to be the best we can be, if we want to be excellent human beings, have excellent character, if we want to experience happiness that is more than just how we feel today, well, we have to build up those moral habits called the virtues. How do you grow as a moral person? How do you grow in character? Aristotle, and we as Christians would say, it's the same way you get good at anything else. If you want to be a good musician, you have to practice. If you want to be a good soccer player, you have to practice. If you want to be a good student, you have to practice and study and repeat certain actions over and over and over again. So how do we achieve that happiness that Aristotle describes? By practicing the virtues, by building up those moral habits, by repetition in small matters and in great matters. Aristotle used the term eudaimonia to describe this blessedness, this excellence, this kind of happiness. And he says if we want to be complete men, if we want to experience eudaimonia, if we want to experience happiness, then we have to do four things. We have to build up four moral habits, what Aristotle called the four cardinal virtues. The word cardinal meaning hinge, like the hinge in a door. What are these qualities? Prudence, justice, courage, also known as fortitude, or temperance. We defined those at this last lecture. Prudence means practical wisdom in 3 steps. You recognize what good you can accomplish, what benefits yourself objectively, and what benefits the people around you, what benefits society. You recognize how to accomplish that good or those good things, and then you follow through and do it. The prudent student is the one who recognizes the good of education and how it enriches you and helps you to grow, recognizes how to grow as a student, meaning taking notes, memorizing the key terms, doing the homework. Then you follow through and you do it. To be prudent is like being a good quarterback or a good general. They know how to get things done according to the goal and the mission they have to accomplish. To Aristotle, the complete man is secondly just. He practices the moral habit, the virtue of justice. The second cardinal virtue, justice, means that you render unto each man what he is due, or, put more in modern terms, that you treat every person fairly. The complete man, according to Aristotle, is also courageous. It doesn't mean that you never experience fear, because there absolutely should be things that we're afraid of, but it means you're not paralyzed by fear. You can overcome fear in order to do what is good. Again, you could be overcoming fear in order to do what's selfish or what's destructive. That's not really courage, according to Aristotle. You always have to be seeking to do what is good, what objectively benefits yourself and human society. You have to be doing what's objectively, Aristotle says, prudent. Again, if you are prudent and just and courageous, you also, Aristotle says, have to practice the fourth cardinal virtue of temperance. It means you exercise self-control and self-discipline. You enjoy good things in this life as much as you can possibly enjoy them. But when those good things start to become self-destructive habits, you begin to say no to yourself. That's the virtue of temperance. Here's the big notion that we're going to add today. Here's how Aristotle thought about these and all the other virtues. Virtue, Aristotle said, is a golden mean. And he's using the word mean like we use in mathematics, an average, a middle point between extremes. To Aristotle, each of these virtues, each of these moral habits was the middle road between two bad moral habits, also known as vices. So when people talk about Miami, Florida as Vice City, that nickname describes that this is a place, according to the nickname, where a lot of people have vices, bad moral habits, smoking and drinking and gambling and all the rest. So a virtue is a good moral habit. You build it up by doing the right thing over and over and over. A vice is a bad moral habit. You build it up by doing that negative thing over and over and over. Brushing your teeth, that's a habit. That doesn't have any kind of moral quality, but you should do it. Aristotle would say that we build up our moral habits like virtues, these golden means, these middle roads, by doing what's right over and over and over again. So for example, if we took being honest as a virtue, as Aristotle does, it means that in small matters and great matters, you practice over and over again being appropriately honest. Here's what Aristotle says, however. You can fall short of that. That would be a vice. You can go beyond and have a warped excess version of that virtue. So honesty is the middle road, the golden mean. Again, you can fall short of that and you're a dishonest person. You fail to rise to the level of being honest. You don't get to that golden middle ground. You can also go too far in a warped sense, and you can speak your mind too freely or with a lack of kindness or compassion. And you can say to your mom, you look fat in that dress today. That's not being honest. That's a warped version of honesty. Like Aristotle says, the middle ground of honesty is the golden mean between these two opposite extremes. Aristotle has names both for falling short of and going beyond this middle ground, this golden mean. A deficit means that you fall short of that virtue, whether it's honesty or one of the four cardinal virtues or some other virtue that Aristotle describes. Like a deficit in your bank account means that you don't have as much money. An excess is what Aristotle uses to describe the vice or the bad moral habit that goes beyond, in a warped version, that golden middle ground, that golden mean of the virtue. If you're carrying excess body fat, that means you have more than you probably need. So it's when you take that virtue and you warp it, you twist it, you exaggerate it. So for each one of these four terms we have so far, for prudence and justice and courage and temperance, we also could describe the deficit, what it looks like when you lack that virtue. That's one of the vices. Or you can talk about what it looks like when you go beyond in a warped version of that virtue. It doesn't mean you're really good at being honest. It means you twist it, you distort it, you have an excess warped version of it. So for the test and for your own knowledge, to know these four cardinal virtues, according to Aristotle, you have to also know what its deficit or lack looks like and what its excess or exaggeration looks like. Aristotle described prudence, for example, as practical wisdom, recognizing the good you can accomplish, how to accomplish it, and then doing it. To Aristotle, the deficits, the lack of prudence, is the vice, the bad moral habit called imprudence. You fall short on one of those three steps. You fail to recognize the good you can accomplish, or you fail to recognize how to accomplish it, or you fail to follow through. Making sense so far? That's the deficit. That means you fall short of that golden mean of prudence in this case. There's also what you could call the excess or the warped version of prudence. That would be manipulation. That would be being deceitful or compromising your integrity as you try to accomplish even some good thing. So let's think about a practical example. Let's say your parents, not during pandemic times, have a curfew for you. You've got to be in your house at 9 p.m. And you think that's ridiculous. All of your friends are staying out till 11 or 12 or whenever they want. And so you want to accomplish the good thing. You have the goal in mind of talking to your parents and of having a later curfew. You think that the goal, what's good for you is that you should have the freedom as a young man to stay out until 11. Well, you could approach that in one of three ways. You could approach it in the imprudent way, meaning you have a lack of strategy or a realization of how you can accomplish this good thing. So if you're going to be imprudent in how you approach that, maybe you go to your parents and you say, you suck, you're the worst parents in the world, all my friends get to stay out later, if you were good parents, you let me stay out. Well, again, that's imprudent. You're probably not going to get what you want. You're not very good at accomplishing that good goal of the later curfew. Jump to the opposite extreme, what Aristotle calls the warped excess of prudence. That's what we would call being manipulative. You could tell your parents, well, if you don't let me stay out till later, then I'm going to call the police and I'm going to tell them that you beat me up. Well, again, maybe you have a twisted way of accomplishing your goals. Maybe you're like a skeevy politician who's able to finagle what he wants, but you're compromising honesty. You're compromising moral character in order to get what you want. That's not prudence. That's being manipulative. So what's the prudence approach? If this is actually your real life situation, if you want to ask your parents for more freedoms, I would say the best way to approach it is to say, Mom and Dad, I know that having more freedoms means that I have more responsibility. That's part of being an adult. So if for the next month I can show you by taking on some new chore or some new responsibility that I'm ready for it, would you consider making my curfew 11 p.m. instead of 9 p.m.? That's savvy. That's prudent. That's the moral skill, the moral virtue that Aristotle describes as being able to recognize what is good, in this case, the later curfew, greater freedom, greater responsibility, recognizing how to get it without being imprudent or manipulative, and then following through and being able to do it. So you have prudence as the golden mean. That's the cardinal virtue that Aristotle describes first. Its deficit is imprudence. Its warped excess, its exaggeration, that's manipulation. Let's look at the next one, justice. Aristotle says the deficit, the lack of justice, is what we call injustice. The warped excess, that's favoritism. What's justice? It's being fair. Whenever fairness is demanded of you, to be a just man means that you honor each person's rights and dignity. If you fall short of that, that's injustice. You fail to recognize other people's rights and dignity. You might see examples of that all throughout our society, people whose rights are compromised, people whose rights are neglected. Opposite extreme, go beyond the golden mean to the warped excess. It's what Aristotle described as favoritism. Instead of giving people what they deserve, you give them more than what they deserve. That doesn't mean that you love your friend and that you give them a gift and you're being extra kind and so forth. It means when fairness is demanded, that you give more than you really should. And a lot of times, injustice and favoritism go hand in hand. As you show this person more than he deserves, you're giving this person less. So imagine it's the classroom. I'm the teacher. I've got to decide who gets what grade. I've got to decide which questions to entertain and so forth. Justice would mean that I listen to everybody's questions. Maybe I like this student more than that student. Maybe this student works with me in the weight room and so I know him better. But it means that everybody gets a fair shot. Everybody gets an equal chance. Injustice would be if I sell you short, if you do your best work, if you do solid work, but I still give you a lower grade than you deserve. Favoritism would be that just because I like this student more, I tend to give him more points, or I tend to exaggerate how much his participation is really going on. This is why a lot of teachers actually prefer to grade assignments without knowing who exactly did them. Maybe gives you a student code or have you write your name on the back of a piece of paper because teachers want to be fair. Teachers, hopefully, want to be just. Maybe you can think of 100 instances already in your life where a teacher was falling short and didn't give you the grade or the recognition you deserve. We would call that the vice of injustice or being unjust. Maybe you can think of teachers who have their teachers' pets and who show too much goodwill toward a student or go beyond where that student really deserves. Well, you're saying that he has the vice of favoritism. So for justice, once again, we have three total terms. Justice, being fair. The warped deficit of justice, which is injustice, failing to be fair. And the warped excess of justice, what Aristotle called favoritism. Certain people get benefits they don't deserve. Again, no surprise here, if courage is overcoming fear to do what's good, the deficit is what Aristotle called cowardice. You run away when really you should stay and fight. You fall short because you give in to fear instead of overcoming it. What's the warped excess of courage? What Aristotle would have called recklessness. You take unnecessary risks just for the thrill of it. You're not trying to accomplish something good. All you want is the rush of adrenaline. So again, maybe you're coming out of Target and you see some events beginning to transpire. Your friend is there and somebody is trying to beat him up. Well, the courageous person would be willing to expose himself to danger in order to defend his friend. The coward would run away, let his friend get beat up. Recklessness would be that you see a fight starting to brew, you have no idea what's going on, but you love a good fight, so you run over there and you start throwing punches. That's not courageous, that's not admirable. You're not overcoming fear to defend your friend. You're just like jumping in and having your thrill and having a twisted kind of fun. Again, running into a burning building, that's courageous if you're trying to save somebody. Running away from a burning building as your family dies, well, that could be cowardice. Running into a burning building because it seems like it's kind of a thrill ride, well, that would be reckless. You've got the golden mean of courage, you've got the deficit of cowardice, and the warped excess of recklessness. Temperance, once again, follows this same sort of concept. Temperance means self-control. You enjoy good things as much as you can before they start to become self-destructive. Aristotle said that if you lack that self-control, you are intemperate. You have intemperance. You can't say no to yourself, and it actually hurts you. Aristotle, and later thinkers even like St. Thomas Aquinas, would say that it's a problem if you can't enjoy good things. And you see the typo here, it should be excess of temperance. Insensibility is the quality by which Aristotle and later St. Thomas Aquinas would say being so self-controlled, being so disciplined that you can't even enjoy the good things of this world. They said it was a vice, it was a bad moral habit if you can't even enjoy a little bit of good stuff in this world. Here's an example. Let's say you're eating Oreos on the couch and you're watching Parks and Rec on Netflix. There's probably a certain amount of Oreos after which you're not going to enjoy them as much. There's going to be diminishing returns, and it's probably going to start to adversely affect how you feel and your health. Whatever that amount of Oreos is that you can maximally enjoy without hurting yourself, that would be practicing temperance to enjoy them and then to say no after that. There might be, maybe you disagree with this, a certain amount of episodes of Parks and Rec. Maybe you watch, 4 23-minute episodes, no problem. That's, an hour and a half of your time. Nobody's the worse for it. If you refuse ever to have an Oreo or watch even one episode of something on Netflix, or you think that life is too serious even to slow down and enjoy one part of your day, then you'd be insensible. It's an excess. It's a warped version of temperance. If you can't say no to yourself, if every time you sit down, you eat the entire package of Oreos and you watch an entire season of Parks and Rec, you're probably intemperate. It's the deficit of temperance, and it's probably going to start to hurt you or catch up to you in ways that are unhealthy. So we've got 12 terms here: prudence, justice, courage, and temperance. The 4 deficits. For each of those virtues, there's a deficit, a vice that is the lack, and the warped excess. Aristotle also describes some other virtues. These aren't going to show up in the test, but just so you can get a picture of, once you have those 4 cardinal virtues of prudence and justice and courage and temperance, Aristotle said there are dozens of other virtues you can possess. For example, the golden mean of humility. You're not too hard on yourself, but you also aren't arrogant or think too exclusively of yourself. Humility is accurate self-knowledge. Again, you're able to consider your own needs, but not in a way that makes you the exclusive focus of your life. You're not a doormat on the one hand, but you're not the center of all existence on the other hand. Magnanimity is a quality that Aristotle described as seeking to do great things. You're humble, but you seek to do what's great at the service of mankind. You want to cure cancer, you want to help people, you want to make a difference. Again, you don't sell yourself short on the possibilities, but again, you don't go too far in thinking that you're too big to fail. To be magnanimous is to be great-souled. Wit, Aristotle said that it's even a virtue that you build up of being capable of humor. There are some people who are just funnier than others or have a better capacity for humor than others. Aristotle called that wit. Aristotle even described friendliness as a virtue, that even if you don't feel like it, that you're able to show respect and you're able to be cordial, you're able to be engaging with people. You're not over the top, you're not obsessive compulsive about relationships, but also you're not just grunting in response to people's greetings in the morning. That's the virtue of friendliness. Maybe not a cardinal virtue, but Aristotle says a moral habit nevertheless. Last of all, Aristotle, and we as Christians would say, that there is a virtue of being able to get angry. Righteous indignation means that the stuff that should make you angry does make you angry. Again, you're not just sort of watching injustices go by and doing nothing about it. That would be the lack or the deficit of righteous indignation. You're also not just jumping to scream at somebody with road rage or anything else just because you feel like it. Righteous indignation is a virtue. It's getting angry at the stuff that should make you angry. Again, those 5 aren't going to show up on the test, but just to know that Aristotle has a bigger picture. We as Christians have that bigger picture of virtues as well. All right, this test coming up is available to you now. It's due this Thursday by 8 a.m. Again, 50 points. 5 of the 25 questions are fill in the blank. 17 are multiple choice. 3 are true or false. Again, make sure you're familiar with these topics before you put your notes away and take the test from memory. Definitions of virtue and of vice, the 4 cardinal virtues, the 3 theological virtues of faith, hope, and love, prudence, justice, courage, fortitude, temperance. Make sure you know the definitions of each of those. Make sure you know that baptism is that moment that we believe we receive the 3 theological virtues as a gift from God. Make sure you know that it's Aristotle we've been studying, and that he's the one who gives us this heritage and this intellectual tradition from Greek philosophy. Last of all, 12 terms for you to be familiar with in particular: prudence, justice, courage, and temperance, as well as each of the deficits: imprudence, injustice, cowardice, and intemperance, and each of the warped excesses: manipulation, favoritism, recklessness, and insensibility. Know those terms in and of themselves. Know what they mean. Good luck on the test, guys, and we'll look forward to seeing you this Thursday.